Hello, I'd like to do a sew along with you, and this is what we're going to be making. It's a pair of pants with front slat seam pockets. So the front is straight, the back is elastic, so it'll stretch and then relax. The way I do my elastic, I don't stitch it. I just make sure that the waistband is small enough to where it almost fits perfectly. That way you don't have to worry about it rolling. And I use a knit elastic, which is a little bit more comfortable, I think, and has very good recovery. So this is a muslin for a client, and it's a custom pattern. Hopefully you can find one online, something, from one of the pattern companies, but at least if you want to do these style pockets, you can do it on a regular pair of pants. Let me show you the pattern. This is the front pattern. Let me move the pants out of the way here. This is the front pattern. And basically what you do is this becomes your seam right here, this part of the pocket. So what you can think of is if this were the regular pair of pants right here, all I do is I come over the measurement here and I come up, and that's 3 inches right there, and that's 3 inches across there, and then you just do a 45-degree angle down for the size of your hand that's going to fit in there. These are ladies' pants, so my hands are bigger than what the ladies are. But anyway, once you do that cut, you can come in and draw your pocket shape out that you want to do, and then just cut it. And then you may want to do a snip or something for your alignment mark, but you really don't have to because it stays in the side seam. So that's the back side that attaches to the side seam and to the top. And this is the other part of the pocket that goes in. So it's fairly easy to make the pattern out of a standard pattern if you like this type of style of pocket. So anyway, this is a custom pattern for a client that I made, and this is going to be the first fitting that we have. And she is a plus size, and she's got a small waist and is larger around the hips, so has a lot of trouble buying pants that fit, so we're going to make her something custom. So anyway, that's the pattern, and the end result will be this right here. And I'm going to show you all the steps, including some of the boring pressing. I'll try to cut that short in places where I can, but I'm going to try to be thorough with it. One disclaimer: I was taught to sew without getting up from the sewing machine and pressing after every seam. So I'll do that on one thing. It's when I do the pockets. I won't press, or I'll suggest that you press, but otherwise I'll go ahead and press the seams as I sew them, and try to be a good example. But unless you've been doing this for years, you're a tailor and do it every day, you probably just need to press your seams after you get finished. So I'll suggest that you do that. But anyway, that's what we're going to make, so let's go ahead and get started. I'll go ahead and cut the fabric out and get it ready to go, and kind of show you what to do with interfacing and everything, and we'll just go through step by step. So let's get started.
Okay, the first thing I like to do before I cut my fabric out is I take the bolt. This is my pressing table that I made. It's very long for this kind of stuff. So I take it and roll it off the bolt. And oftentimes you'll see that they've pressed over the edges to make it fit on the bolt. It's very common. So when we cut, we want to be able to use our salvage edge. So I take it and I push it out and I press it, and then I continue pressing to get my muslin nice and flat and even. So I'll bring the salvage edge over. Match it up with the edge, and you'll find your crease, if you're going to cut on the fold for anything, will be off once you do this. Unfortunately, they don't line things very well when they're adjusting the fabric for putting it on the bolt. So anyway, I always do this. You'll have to be careful. It'll wrinkle underneath. If you're on an ironing board, it may be a little bit different, obviously, than what I'm doing here, but you'll get the idea. Just line up the salvage edge, then press your crease back in the side of it over here, and you'll be good to go. So anyway, I'm going to continue to press this out to give me the length that my pants are going to be. What I do is I lay my pattern down, give myself a couple of inches, cut it out, and then roll some more off, press it, give myself a couple of extra inches on each end, cut it out again. It's a lot easier to cut when your fabric is cut close to the size of the pattern than it is leaving it on the bolt and trying to get everything lined up. So anyway, that's just my personal preference. You can handle that however you want, but just remember, if you're working with the muslin, they're going to roll those salvage edges under, and it may prevent you from being on grain when you cut it. So go ahead and roll it out and press it, and then we'll move on to getting the pattern cut out next.
Okay, I've got all my pieces cut out, and one of the things I do to mark on the pattern for my right side is I use these little safety pins. So I'll mark each one on the right side before I get started. Muslin really has no right and wrong side, but just do this out of habit, and that way when you start making something out of your real fabric, you'll be in the habit of doing it. So I try to do pretty much the same thing with muslins for the clients that I do with the real fashion fabric. So just try to stay in the habit of doing the proper thing. Okay, safety pin on the right side, safety pin on the right side. There's our front, and there's our back pattern. Got my other pieces cut out here. I've got my back part of my pocket, waistband interfacing, so that's the back part of the pocket. And I've got my front pockets. Let's see here. And what I've done is I write the right side, or I'm sorry, the wrong side. I put a W on the wrong side of the pockets, so it just makes it easier for me to keep things straight. So I've got a W there, one there, and one there. So what I've done is I've interfaced the inside of the pocket on each side, and the seam will be sewed right there, and it will be turned back when it's sewed onto the pants. So that'll stabilize the front pockets. I've stabilized the front waistband, kind of minus my seam allowances, so those two will be sewed together. And then this is the back waistband, which will have the elastic on it, and it has no interfacing on it. So I cut this on the fold using my pattern. Then I cut two of these individually, and then on my pockets I cut two of each. So let me explain to you how the pockets are going to go on real quickly, because that's what we're going to sew on first. Alright, you see the slant here for the slant front pocket. So we've got two pieces of our pattern. So what we'll do first is, so we get these apart, We'll sew right sides together. Along this seam line here. Then we'll take the pocket and it will be sewed together with this other pocket with these seams lining up, and then this part is the extension that lines up with the side seam. That will become the new side seam, and that's where your hand will go in the pocket. So that's going to be the arrangement of that. So once it's there, what we'll do is we'll stitch this to hold it down, we'll stitch this to hold everything down, and then this becomes part of the side seam once we sew the side seam up. So that's what we're going to do first, is sew this on each side of the front side, and we'll do the same thing. I'll show you how to do one, and you'll repeat the same thing on the second one. So let's do that next. Okay, since this is going to be the final fitting, I go ahead and serge everything that I would serge on the finished product. So I've got this thing set up to where it barely trims, just a little tiny bit off, and it's on a three thread narrow serge. So here we go. Okay, there's the seam side of one pocket. Do the seam side of the slant pocket. And I won't worry about this, I'll just serge that. Sometimes you can do a French seam on these also. Depends on how elegant you want the pants. So I'll just keep serging the pocket edges. Front pocket edge. This is the one that's going in the seam again. Okay, that's the pockets. So those are the ones that are going in the seams. Don't worry about the top, it gets enclosed in the waistband, so I don't have to worry about it. And then the sides, you can either again do a French seam on, or you can just serge the edges. On these I'll just serge the edges. So I'm going to do the rest of the pants, all the seams all the way around, so there aren't any exposed edges, and then we'll go to the construction part of the pants after that. So I'll see you then. Okay, now we're going to put some interfacing right here at a 1/2 inch in from, this is going to be a 1/2 inch seam allowance. 1/2 inch in, we're going to stabilize this pocket. So I've cut a little strip and I'm going to iron it on. Okay, now that that's on, I'm going to go all the way around. I'm hovering and steaming over what I'm going to press next. So I'm getting a little bit of steam on the seam, and then I'm just setting my iron on there. I don't want to stretch this out anymore. Just wanting to kind of meld those serger stitches down nice and flat, so when we sew our seams it won't be sticking out. And my iron only steams at the front part here, so you'll see me leading with it always, and then the heat will follow. This is a gravity feed iron. Normally I use my commercial presser when I do this, it's big and it'll press everything at once, but I know most people don't have that, so I'm just showing you if you use an iron what to do. And I'm using a pressing table that I made. I just went to Home Depot and bought a nice board that's about 6 feet long by probably about 28 inches wide. It's actually the width of the plastic table it's sitting on. Plastic table I got at Office Max, one of those places, and I bought some at Sam's also. But you can get them like 4 feet, 6 feet, 10 feet. I think they have an 8-foot one too, but for this I'd get like a 6-footer, or you can buy one of the boards and have Home Depot or Lowe's cut it for you to make it smaller if you don't want one this big. I do a lot of drapery sewing, so I need a very large pressing area once I get the drapes strung out on here. So actually this is fairly small for drapes, so I've got one bigger and larger and longer for when I'm doing large sets of draperies. So again, just hovering my iron over the seam and then going back and pressing, not dragging my iron. So I'm just going to kind of hover over these areas and make sure everything is still good and flat. I see a few little wrinkles right here. Okay, since interfacing has been put on there, I'm going to walk away and let this set and let that interfacing dry completely and cool down completely. Don't get in a hurry on that. Just make sure it has plenty of time to completely cool down. Plus your seams need to cool down too. So anytime you're doing this with steam, walk away for a little while, let it set. And so I'll go through and I'll press everything else. I'll put the interfacing on the other inside of the pocket. So again, that's when we put our pins on the right side, we can tell that we're on the wrong side. So it makes it easier without having to figure out which one goes which way when you don't have a right or wrong side on these. So anyway, that's it. I'll leave it here, let it set, and then we'll move on next and we'll sew our side seam pockets in. And after that, we will do a stay stitch all the way around the waistband. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we've got our pocket on the front. We've got right sides together, so there's our safety pin to show us we have the right side. And again, that's why I use it and put it there. Yeah, kind of caught a hold of my serge stitch. Anyway, so that's the wrong side of the pocket. I've got my W on there for wrong side. And I'm going to just align these seams to the edge. Keep everything perfectly aligned here on the side seam. Put it under the needle. We're going to do a 1/2 inch seam. I design all my own patterns, so I use 1/2 inch seams, not 5/8 inch. So go ahead and pull your pants up here so they don't slag off. And I know some of you don't have an industrial machine. That's the nice thing about these machines. You have a good flat working surface. So here we go, 1/2 inch seam. So go forward, lock your stitch in. To the bottom and lock it in. Okay, after we do that, go ahead and cut our thread up here. We're going to splay the pocket over, and we're going to keep our seam going this way. And we're going to understitch on the pocket to keep that seam down and keep the pocket from peeping out. I can't talk. Anyway, so splay it open. Make sure again your seam is heading this way, away from the pants. And then fold it over, splay it open, and I've got a 1/2 inch seam, so I'm not going to line up my edge of my presser foot with the seam. I'm going to, let's see, I think that will catch it. Yeah, it will. So I'm going to line the edge of my presser foot up, and this is a 1/4 inch presser foot. So I've got a 1/2 inch seam, so I should be able to catch that seam on the edge nicely. Keep everything from peeking out. So if you have to, you can go press this, just press the pocket to the right. I've been doing this long enough to, I don't press until I absolutely have to. After I stay at the machine, get everything sewed, and then I go press. So a couple of stitches forward and back, and here we go. And just so you know, my stitch length is set. This is a dial style stitch, so you can really make it variable. I go in between 2.5 and just under 3 for my stitch length on this kind of stuff. I don't keep the tension that tight compared to some of the home sewing machines. It causes seams to pucker, so I'll loosen the bobbin thread up a bit. Okay, so you can go if you need to now and press that, and I'm going to restart the camera so it doesn't run out of memory. If I go too long, it actually runs out of memory, so let me restart it and I'll show you how to do the rest of it. Okay, the next thing we're going to do now is we have our right side of our pants here. We have the wrong side of the back side of the pocket here, so we're going to take and lay this down and match our pocket. So all of our seams should match. It's important because this back pocket becomes our seam allowance on the pants once we get this on. So keep everything lined up. If you cut it accurately, it should line up perfectly. Okay. Go up just a tad. Alright, here we go. And I'm just going to use the edge of my presser foot. I'm going to come back and serge this, so a little bit beyond the edge of my presser foot to sew this on. I'll come back and serge this after I've sewed it to clean up the edges. If you need to, bury your needle and go around your curve, but honor the curve there. Back tack at the end. Okay, now that we have that done, now we need to attach the seam to the pocket to the top and the side. So we're going to fold it over to where the understitching is on the inside of the pocket. It should fold over nicely. So just kind of finger press that down. If you need to, you can go to the iron and you can press it, but the way I've sewed it, it just folds right over. Kind of falls into place. Okay, we're going to sew the top first, and then we will do the sides. So what we want to do is line up get our seam nice and flat. We're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam, and this is just a tacking stitch, so we don't have to worry about it when we're sewing the waistband on or we're sewing our side seam. So I'm going to pull this over and pull everything nice and tight at this point. Back tack to lock it in. There we go. Now we're going to do the side seams. Cut my thread, bobbin thread. There we go. Now we need to line up the side seam, because the pocket's going to be part of the side seam, and you can roll it over and you can kind of see what's going to go on here, how your hand's going to go in it. So this needs to line up to the side seam, so we're going to sew it down. So take your pocket, line it up over at the side seam. Make sure everything is good and flat when you do this, so you don't have a gap in your pocket. So I'm kind of pulling the bottom seam down a little bit while I'm pulling the pocket down a little bit to get everything nice and tight right through here, because you don't want a gap in your front side of your pocket when you're wearing your pants. So again, 1/4 inch seam, basically the width of the presser foot is good. And my other thread, where'd it go? Here it is. Okay. Stretch everything back out again since I pulled it out of the presser foot. Get it good and tight. There we go. Here we go. Lock it down. And lock it at the end. And now we can see our pocket. There it is. Put your hand in it right there. This is part of the side seam. This is part of the waistband up here. And everything looks good. If you want to now, you can go press it. Get everything nice and flat. But you can see the interfacing on this because it's muslin, and I've used a little bit. It's SF101 interfacing, so it's a little bit heavier than what I use on the fashion fabric. I just don't use my expensive interfacing on muslins, so it's kind of a waste of money. So anyway, that's it. Next thing we'll do is sew up the side seam, start assembling the pants. Okay, sorry I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. I want to stay stitch the waistband next, so I do it while everything's separated instead of after it's been sewed up. It's just easier. So about the width of the presser foot on this machine, it's 1/4 of an inch. So I'm just going to come across the waistband. I don't have to go all the way across this one. Well, I'll go ahead and go back across it because I'm going to stay stitch this part over here too. So the top's going to get 2 seams. Now I'm just on the pocket. Back tack at the end. Okay, there's that. That's how you do the top. Just go from one end to the other. Okay, that takes care of the top. Let me get the back. And it's just as simple as on the back, just sewing across the flat seam at the top at 1/4 of an inch. So, width of the presser foot. Okay, here we go. Back tack at the end. That's that one. Just repeat that on the other front and back. And then we can go through and sew our side seams up. So take care of that and we'll start on side seams next. Okay, now we take our front and our back of our pants. We found our safety pins. We put them right sides together, or whatever you've used to mark the right side of your fabric. And I'm going to do the inseam first. So I'm just going to line up the edges here at 1/2 inch. These 2 points can be a little bit of a hassle to try to get together. I just need to make sure they meet at the 1/2 inch mark there. Where my seam is, which is right there. Just get that tacked down before I start. There we go. Alright, now we'll work our way down the side seam. The pattern's cut correctly. You don't need any notches because everything should line up. I don't sew with pins, so I use the industrial technique of holding the fabric. So here we go at 1/2 inch. Stop the needle down, get our pants lined up again. I'll mark right there. Flatten everything out. And we're staying at our 1/2 inch mark. So So we're going to pivot now and line up our end. And I've got everything lined up. What I'm going to do is I can see this bottom peeking out here. I'm going to start sewing, and then as I see it approaching, I'm going to pull the bottom where it evens up. So I've got everything lined up. I'm holding it down here like this, keeping a hold of it, keeping the seam lined up. So here we go. Okay, I've got around the curved part. Now the rest of it should be straight, so it should come right together. So let's hold the end together again. And I keep my hand underneath here to guide that bottom seam to keep everything lined up as I'm pulling on it. So. And the result is when I get to the end, everything should line up. There we go. It looks like this bottom one, I may need to cut it a little bit. I looked at that on the pattern, thought I had it closer than that, so it looks like on the back side I need to shorten this end of the seam about 1/8 of an inch to make it line up perfectly. So I'll make that adjustment before I sew it again, but it's close enough. Okay, that's the inseam. Next we'll do the outseam. This is the one where the pocket is going to be lined up, so I'm going to start at the top where the pocket is. Get that all lined up perfectly right there. Half-inch seam allowance again. Get it under the foot, get it locked down. Now all I have to do is concentrate on keeping everything lined up as I go down. So those edges align, and here we go. Keep that pocket nice and tight there. Alright, go down to the end, line everything up again. So I'm pulling on it until I get to a point up here where I can clamp down on it where everything's lined up nicely. So this seam seems to be a little bit more accurate than my other one was. Seam keeps trying to pull out a little bit more than what the bottom seam does, so I'm going to adjust for that by pulling the bottom out a little bit. The end is still lined up perfectly, so make sure I'm still lined up down here. And that's both of our seams. So we've got our pocket seam sewed here. Let you see how that lays out, and we'll just do the other side, and then we'll sew the crutch together. So there's our pocket right there. And once I press the seams and everything ought to line up nicely. So, okay, do the other side the same way, and then we'll go to sewing the crotch seam after that. Okay, now obviously you want to press your seams as they were sewn, as they say. So we're pressing them on the wrong side. Let that cool down before I move it. Okay, now we'll press the other side. Lock those stitches in with a lot of steam. Alright, I'll let that set and cool. I'll do the other one, and then we're going to turn them. I'll show you how I press the seams open after this. So let me do the other one, let it cool, and then we'll move on to that. Okay, now we're going to press the seams open. So I've laid it flat, wrong side out, and pressed everything to get it nice. And so let me show you how I press the seams. I use a sleeve board, and I do them 1/2 at a time. So I'll do the bottom half first. And we're going to just kind of open this up with our fingers. I'll lay it out, get it started. Then I'm going to pull the fabric a little bit tighter down around it. And I'm going to take my iron and I'm just going to hover over the seam. I'm not going to press it from this side. I just want to get it kind of splayed open. So a lot of steam, just hover over it, and it's kind of lightly pressed open at this point. So normally you want to let this kind of cool off for a little while, but for the sake of time I'll go ahead and pull it off now. But if you let it cool, it will stay open nicely when you're going to turn it over. We're going to turn it over and press it from the right side next. So that's what we're getting ready for. So now I bring the other side up, do the same thing. Come on, get my seam open. That's what happens when the serge studs line up almost perfectly down your seam. Okay, right here you're going to see it fold over where the pocket is in the seam there. So, okay, again, just lots of steam. I'm going to go ahead and pull it tight around the edge. And if you can get one of these sleeve boards, I would highly recommend it. They work great for this kind of stuff. If not, just use your ironing board. Okay, again, I'm not pressing, I'm just hovering over it with the iron. Back side may be barely hitting it. The idea is to get it to lay open. Okay, now, again, you let that cool completely. Now we're going to turn the seam right side out, and you do it on both sides. and then now everything will lay nice and flat. And when you press it, you won't have any creases on this side. So kind of pull it, get it good and tight, and then take your iron, and now you can press it. And you'll have a perfectly flat seam. So there's that one. Do this one. You can see the seam lays nice and flat and open for you after doing that. So go ahead and pull it nice and tight. This one you want to kind of take your time and pull the pocket open nicely so it doesn't get a crease in it. It'll look that much better. So ideally I just leave that and let it cool. If you have a clapper, a wood clapper, you can kind of come down through here. It'll help remove some of the moisture and set the seam. So anyway, that's the way I press my seams. It gets everything nice and flat and looks very professional. So give that a try and see if that works for you. Okay, now we've got all the seams pressed open. It's time to prepare to sew the crotch seam. So what we're going to do is we're going to take one pair or one leg. It's going to be wrong side out. The other leg is going to be right side out. And our theory here is we're going to put the right side out inside the wrong side out leg, and we're going to have right sides together. So I'm going to show you the quick and easy way to do this. You want to try to keep these two seams right here together as you put it in. So I just grab a hold of this seam. I go all the way to the end of the leg. Right there. And I open everything up, try to pull the rest of the pant through. There it is. Anyway, I open everything up, I line up that seam there, and then I line up the other seam on the other leg. See if I can get it there. Then I just take the pants and I shake them like that. And what you will notice after you've done that is your crotch seams will pretty much line up for you perfectly. Okay, the only critical part of this keeping perfectly aligned is going to be where the crotch, the inside seam meets at the crotch. So what I do is I take a pin. Let me grab a pin. Okay, I use these long flower head pins, and I make sure this seam is perfectly lined up when I go over it. So I'm going to put the seam together, stab this through, and I'm going to make sure that the seam comes through the other seam, which I lined it up so well it was almost perfect. Let me move it over just a tad. There we go. Now I'll go through the other seam and I matched it up perfectly. So I go down, match the seams going down, and then when I come back up I match the seams coming up. And that's all I pin. If you want to, you can pin all this together, but when I sew this, what I will do is I will start right here, sew up this side, and then I'll come back and sew up that side. That way I keep this perfectly lined up. So let's go to the sewing machine and we'll get it sewed up. Okay, we're at the sewing machine now, and we've got right sides together on the crotch seam, so we're going to sew it up. And as I told you, I'm going to start in the middle, come up to the side, then I'll come back to the middle and go back up the other side. This is so that this seam in the inside seam, or on the back side, will match up perfectly down here. So this allows me to make sure that that matches up. Let me get on my 1/2 inch seam mark here, and I'll start just to the side of the seam here. It actually gives you a chance to put kind of a double seam in that area of the crotch. Okay, here we go. And I'm just going to leave that seam in there. This is the one and only time you'll see me sew over a pin. I go real slow and I turn the hand wheel to make sure the pin's not going to get hit. Okay, we're over it now. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my pants this way so my 1/2 inch seam allowance lines up nicely. Make sure my seam's lined up. I know it's hard for you to see, it's kind of covering everything up, but all I'm doing is making sure the seam's lined up at the edge here. I'm going to do just a few inches at a time. Got to make sure I don't have any creases in the bottom. Keep everything stretched out nicely and stay on my 1/2 inch mark. Okay, stop with your needle down. Line up your seams. Get this switched around here where everything will line up and lay flatter. Needle down. Got the ends lined up now. I'm going to get my hand down on the bottom layer where I can pull it evenly, keep everything nice and flat. And now we can go. Back tack at the end, lock it down nicely. Okay, that's one side. Now we'll do the other side. Take our pin out now, we don't need it anymore. It's locked down. So I'm just going to turn it over. Everything out of the way since the leg's going on the inside this time. But you'll be able to see it better. Okay, there's where we started. So we're going to go ahead and come across the crotch inside seam again just to reinforce it. Won't hurt. Back tack. And now we're going to be coming back this way. So now I'm just eyeballing my 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I've done this enough where I pretty much know where it is. But if you need to do it, you can turn it over and line it up with your seam allowance on the other side. If that's what you need to do, feel free to do that. I've just done this so much I know where it is. Cut my previous threads here. Alright, everything lined up. Here we go. The top lined up here. everything nice and flat. And here we go. Just making sure everything's flat within the seam area. That's all I'm concerned about. Back tack at the end to lock it down. And that is it. We've got our crutch seam sewed up. On, pull, there we go. So now we just pull our pants right side out. Actually, when you pull it, it'll be wrong side out, then you can pull it right side out. There's our crutch seam. There's the bottom. Everything's nice and even, so we'll press this seam, then press it open, then we'll be moving forward to put our waistband on. So I'm not going to show pressing this. I mean, it's pretty obvious. You do exactly what we did before, just splay it, steam it, then flip it over and actually press it on that side. So, alright, we'll move forward. Okay, I'm sorry guys. I told you I wasn't going to show you this, but sometimes I think things are obvious. But for pressing this, put a ham on the inside and work your way around the crutch seam. That way you can keep it shaped the way the body needs to be shaped. So just like we did before, get this where I can get this seam open all the way down. Okay, you just go until you hit your crease where you start seeing wrinkles, and then that's all we're going to do initially is just this part up here. So just take and make sure our seam is open. Kind of finger press it, and then we're going to pull it up and hit the other part. So the only thing I'm concerned with not having a wrinkle is the part that I am pressing at my current time. So just get everything pulled around. Seam open. This takes some time to do, but it's worth it once you get everything pressed from the outside. Okay, that takes it all the way down to the bottom. Gonna finger press it again. And then we just turn it over. Back part first. Work our way down to the bottom of the crutch. There we go. Yeah, I've got a few wrinkles there. I've got it opened up nicely, so I'll take advantage of that while I've got it there. That other stuff can press out later. Okay, now that that's done, just want to show you, see how perfectly the leg seam's lined up there. So using that pin and a hand turning the flywheel as you're going over it. Again, you want to make sure you don't hit the pin straight on because it can break and actually do eye damage. Okay, so now we have that. Now we can come in here, press everything open. Got one little area right here. Make sure it stays pressed down. A lot of different angles there. Okay, we'll flip it over now. One of the things I forgot to mention, I go ahead and stitch over this seam right here to keep it down. So after I press this, I'll come back and go over these seams and sew them down. That way when you're putting the waistband on, you're sure that these seams will stay open. So just come here and take your needle and go across there, you know, back stitch the beginning at the end. Make sure that thing stays down. Just do it at 1/4 of an inch. Your seam is going to be 1/2 inch when you're putting on your waistband, and that should take care of the problem. So okay, let me press this other side and then we'll be done with this and we'll move on to the waistband. Or what I was hitting. The logo label for the ham. Okay, we got that part done. Now we're going to work our way down. This is the back seam, so it's much longer than the front seam is. Work our way all the way down to the crotch area. Normally I'd be giving a little bit more time for everything to dry. Or cool down, I should say, when I press these seams, but I'm just trying to show you what we do. Alright. This is where all those seams meet up, and it's important to get it flat. Seam in there is kind of bulky. You can always trim that down a little bit more if you need to, but it should be okay. Okay, that's it. We've got our crotch seam all pressed up. We've got our front pockets right there. Everything looks good. So we'll move on to putting the waistband on. And remember, you're going to come across here and stay stitch these two seams so they stay flat. So I'll do that next. I'm not going to show it, but it's easy enough. Just sew across, keep it flat. Sew across the front part to keep it flat, and then you move on to putting the waistband on. Okay, I didn't want to bore you with all the pressing details here, so I'm going to show you what I just did. First off, this is the front side of the pants of the waistband, and we've rolled the seam right to the inside and pressed it. And then, so I can get it apart here after pressing it. This is going to be on the inside only. we turned it over and turned it under about 1/4 of an inch. Serge the edge that's going to be sewed on first, and then it's going to be turned over like this, laid down, and then we're going to stitch in the ditch out here on the waistband side, and that will have it go through the rolled up seam here to give you a good clean finish on the inside without a raw seam. Okay, on the back, fold it in half, serge the side that's going to be sewn on first, and then this is going to be on the inside. We've turned it back about 1/4 of an inch also to give ourselves a clean finish. So that's what we do on that. Now we'll go sew the waistband together, and when we put it on the skirt, we're going to leave these two seams about 2 inches on each side unsewn, and that's because I'm going to feed the elastic through the waistband, and I'll show you how to do that in the end. I used to sew everything on and then try to put the elastic on, but what I noticed is no matter how hard I tried, the waistband would become skewed when I put the other stitch in the ditch side on. So I finally figured out another way to do this to make it where this will look good, it'll stay straight. I also make this small enough. Let me grab my elastic. Okay, I use a knit elastic, and you can see there's not going to be any wiggle room hardly at all for it once I get it through there. And that's by design. I just don't want to have it wiggle around. That keeps me from having to stitch on it. It's not going to turn. The other thing I do is I stitch the end of it. Instead of using a safety pin or something like that to pull it through, I do this. That way I can use a stick, stick it in there and push it through real easily, and then I just remove those 3 or 4 stitches, and I'm ready to go. So, alright, let me get this sewed up. We'll get the waistband put on, and we'll move forward from there. Okay, our next step is to sew our waistband together. So we've got these 2 pieces here that are interfaced. We want to put them right sides together. Again, our seam allowance is 1/2 inch. And I'm lucky in that muslin, I don't have to pattern match, but when I do the final pattern for this client, it's going to have a pattern, so you have to painstakingly make sure everything matches up. So it makes it a little bit more of a challenge. Okay. Back tack at the beginning to lock it down. This is just a good straight line, so make sure my ends are lined up down here as I always do. Tack at the end. Okay, now we'll take it and we will press it open. So when we press it, we will make the seam go toward the top of the waistband. So whichever way we end up pressing it on this, that will be the top side of the waistband. So if I've done this correct, these 2 guys should match once it's pressed.
I'm a little bit off. I need to remeasure this. I may have cut this a little wide. It was a little sloppy when I cut it, so I'll go ahead and trim it down to make sure that it's even with that. Because I'm off about 1/4 of an inch, it looks like. So, okay, I'll go take care of that, get this trimmed down to match this, and then I'm going to do a trial fit just by pinning it around the waistband to make sure everything lines up perfectly. And I'll notch the center of this also. Let me go ahead and do that now. It doesn't take much, just a little bitty snip. Okay, now I know my center line on there. I've got my fold on there. Go ahead and clip this because I'll end up pressing it to make it lay nice and flat. Okay, got my center notches. I'll do the same thing. Well, I don't have to on my pattern because I've got my front and back seam, so I'm good on that. So if you want to be very accurately, you can do the 1/4 inch, the quarter side seam notches, and that'll line everything up. But I just do the front and back, and then I pin it front and back and take it around, make sure I've got a 1/2 inch on each side once I sew it on. It's just a quick check. Again, this is a new pattern for me, so in this process I just make sure everything lines up nicely. That way if I need to adjust anything slightly, I don't have to worry about it going forward. So if you've got a commercial pattern, it's going to match, so you should be able to do it. You should be able to sew your seams together and put your waistband on. So let's go through that, and I'll be right back. Okay, I've used Wonder Clips to attach the serged edge of the waistband to the pants, and then I've got double clips in the area where I'm going to stop, probably about 4 inches before I reach it, or 3 and 2 on each side of it, somewhere in there, just enough room to get the elastic through with ease, and then I'll sew that part after I do that. So I've got to leave enough room because it's going to be turned and stitched down all the way up to that point. So I'll probably leave 3 inches roughly on this side. Maybe from this clip to that clip will be enough. So remember, this is going to be already sewn on, and this will be sewed on, so I just need enough room to get my elastic in there. So we're going to start over here close to this double edge, and then we'll go all the way around. And my seam allowance is a 1/2 inch. I'm going to pull this up and clip it again. You'll notice as you look around certain areas where the pants are trying to pull down away from the waistband. So if you see any of those areas, stop and straighten it out. But we want our waistband to be flat when we start sewing. So I'll get it nice and flat. I'll go past my 2 clips there. Get myself on a 1/2 inch seam. Get my thread tails long enough and keep track of them. Alright, I'm going just a little bit past it, lining up my seam on a 1/2 inch. And right there. Okay, here we go. Move the clip out of the way. On a back tack here, lock it down good. Alright, we'll just make our way around the waistband now. As you go, just smooth things out. Make sure all your seams stay nice and flat. I'm sewing from the inside to the outside on this so I can keep track of the waistband. Want to keep a nice straight seam as you're doing this.
I like these Wonder clips rather than pins because they don't distort the fabric when you clip them down. It keeps everything nice and flat. Plus they're easy to remove. Okay, I'm going to take my tweezers again and pull this up a little bit. Notice it's trying to pull away from the edge. Got anchored down. Just keep turning your pants, trying to keep everything nice and flat ahead of you. And I'm just slightly pulling to keep everything nice and flat. When you come on your pocket, you want to push it down and keep it flat also. And you want to do it as you're going all the way around the pocket. So I'm going to move my clip a little bit so I can get it anchored down right there on the edge. Pull and straighten. And you'll notice I'll kind of move these clips as I go along to keep everything else lined up. Okay, rotate again. Make sure everything is staying nice and flat. You'll notice my waistband is curled up back here, trying to close again, so I'm going to open it up, keep it flat. It's important. Okay, here we go. Okay, I'm back to my double clamps here, so I'm going to go ahead and anchor it down. Cut my threads. Good long thread tails. Go past my double clips. Good ways this time. Because I sewed up fairly close to it, I just want to leave a good opening there where I can get to what I need to get to when I pull the elastic through. Get on my 1/2 inch seam allowance again, back tack, and then we're off again. Noticing this is trying to come away here, so I'm going to go ahead and put another clamp on there to keep that tied down good. The waistband is trying to close again on me, so again, just keep it open and flat. That way you don't accidentally catch the whole waistband as you're sewing it on. Okay, this is where my seams are trying to come apart here, so I'm going to get all this reattached, get my seams lined up. Anytime I see this, I go ahead and take care of it, get them lined up, because if you don't, they'll start walking away from you. So, okay, here we go. Flatten everything out, give it a slight tug. And I see my seam coming apart here also. It's coming out of a line when I say apart. So I try to keep everything perfectly matched on the edge. It will show in the end if you don't. So I'm going to take care of it right now. Alright, that's got it all held down. So a little bit at a time, because this is the part that was trying to kind of pull apart on me. And we're coming back to our starting point, which is where we need to leave an opening. There are my double clips. So I'm going to pull this up, and I'm going to sew to about right there and then back tack. And that's it. Our waistband is almost all the way on. So what we will do now is I'll go ahead and I'm trying to set a good example for you guys. I don't press at this point normally, but I'm going to encourage you, especially if you're new, go ahead and go press this, and then we're going to turn this over and do our understitching. So I will leave my clamps on there as my notice anyway. So we're quote going to go press this, and then we're going to fold this over and do our understitching, stitching in the ditch I should say. So we'll do that next. Okay, I've got the waistband pressed over, and what you do is you want this just to barely cover the stitch line that tied the front of the seam on for the skirt. So there's your stitch line right there, and as you go around, just line it up there and then repress the top, recrease it, and you'll notice as you go around it may drop a little bit further down than what you want. In those cases, just repress it and keep lining it up as you go around. And sometimes beginners are unsure about this. It's a little bit easier on an industrial machine because everything stays flat, but if you got a machine up on the table and everything, you may want to use Wonder Tape, the wash away Wonder Tape, and go around and stick this down. That'll ensure you it won't move. So that's one of the suggestions I can have for you. If you're new and unsure and having trouble keeping everything steady, use some of those sewer aids to help you out. So here we go. I'm going to get started here. Back tack to lock the stitches in here. And we're just stitching in the ditch. Just try to keep everything nice and flat. And I'm pulling the seam apart as I'm doing this. That ensures I stay right in the ditch, and my stitches should be hidden. Have a look and see what we've got going here. Okay, you can see how the stitch is catching the edge right there, not too deep, so we don't have a big flap. That's exactly what we want. Going slow over my seam there. I was making sure that it was staying nice and flat. Okay, you can barely see the seam in there, right in the ditch. Once I press it, this little piece right here will flatten out and it'll pretty much hide it. So just take your time, stay in the ditch, and over time with practice this gets easier and easier. As with anything, a little bit more experience and it's easier. Okay, I'm coming up on my double pins, so I'm going to stop. I'm going to back tack. cut my thread, come over to the other side and continue on. Cut these thread tails and get them out of the way. On the finished garment, what I would do there is I'd actually pull that thread through, tie it off on the end so I don't have a loose edge on the other side, but I'm not so much worried about it on this. Okay, start where my pin is. And try to hold my thread and hold my seam open at the same time. So, okay, here we go. Back tack there, and I'm off. Hand just slipped, and I got one actually on the waistband, one stitch right there. It looks like two of them hit the waistband, so on the finished garment I'd be concerned about that, but on the muslin I'm not so much concerned about it. Double check, make sure everything's still catching and everything looks good. Go ahead and cut my thread here. Okay, I'm going to lay everything out, make sure everything is nice and flat, and continue on. Coming up on the pocket area, I'll make sure it's flat. Everything lays nice and flat there. Coming up on my double needles again, and I will stop. And the only thing we'll have left to do then is pull the elastic through and close it off, and then do the hem. And our pants will be completed. I know it's been a very long sew-along. Without having to show and talk and all that, I can do this in about half the time. So get where you do it enough, you can do it very quickly. Okay. Cut my thread. Have a look at the back here, and it looks like I missed right here, so I'm going to go over, I'll take these seams out, I'll make sure that comes down far enough for it to catch. That's one of those areas where you need to kind of roll it over, get it a little bit closer, so it can happen sometimes when you're pulling to get everything nice and tight. This one went too far, so I'm going to go ahead and pull these out and adjust this and redo this, but I'm not going to film that. That's some of the things you'll run into sometimes when you're doing this. Go around and check the rest of it. Everything else looks good. Yep, it all caught, so we're good. Okay, alright, I'll adjust that one part and re-sew that little space, and then we'll go on to putting the elastic in the waistband. Okay, got the band fixed now, so it's caught all the way around. And so now we have these two openings next to the side seams, and I'm going to feed the elastic through. Once again, I've sewed a few stitches right here on the end to make a little cup. I've got this crochet hook or whatever they call it, and you can use chopsticks or whatever. Now it's important to notate the direction you're going in because you want to make sure it doesn't roll. Mine's going to be tight, so it's not going to roll anyway, so make sure it's not too tight. Take it, feed it through till you get to the end. And if it's tight like mine is, the stick and everything's not going to fit in nicely, so you'll have to gather it kind of the way I'm doing here. And let's see, should be about ready to pop out the other side. There we go. Okay. Pull the stick out now and remove the stitches. Kind of my crude version of a seam ripper. Okay, come apart. Tell you what, I'm just gonna cut it. Let me get some scissors. Okay, what I'd noticed is it kind of frayed it, so you can just cut the little bit off. Okay, what we're going to do now is we've got it through. We're going to sew it into the seam here. So yeah, I'm just going to keep working it. You can see how tight I've got this. So once I get it leveled out, it'll flatten out. Okay, I tell you what, let me go. I'll need to take a few more seams out to open this up a little bit more, and I'll be right back. Okay, I've opened up the seam a bit more, and it allowed it to pass through. So now you see the edge of the elastic there where that seam is. So all we're going to do is make sure it's underneath the seam, and then we're going to stitch in the ditch down the side here to lock it in place. So we'll do that on both ends. I'm only going to show this one. You'll know what to do on the other end. Basically gather it in the middle, give yourself some slack where you have some room to work with, and then you can come and grab it and it will stay into place for you. So, and you want to get enough in there where it will obviously catch. So stitch in the ditch. Make sure I still feel elastic all the way underneath, and I do. Thread underneath my foot here. Okay, here we go. Okay, there's one. And it's caught. Okay, now I'll just do the same thing on this other end, the exact same thing. And then all I'm going to do is just go ahead and finish the stitch in the ditch here to close the waistband up, and then we'll move on to hemming. So again, just do the same thing here, stitch in the ditch on this side to lock it into place, and then turn it over and stitch in the ditch right here to close it off, and you'll be done with your waistband. So next thing we're going to do is hem our pants, and that is as simple as just turning it up under a 1/2 inch, I think is what I've got on these, and stitching it. So that'll be fairly simple to do, but I'll go ahead and go through that with you real quickly too. So do that next. Okay, the hem's going to be a simple hem. It's just a double turn, so press it with 1 inch and then turn it under and meet the edges, and then it's just a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I'm just going to show you on one of them. It's very simple. Just basically sew at the 1/2 inch mark, and you're supposed to start on the inside leg. Let me find the inside leg. There it is. So we'll just line up with a 1/2 inch gauge and do our hem. And I know you can't see it because I'm having to do it in a tube. These industrial machines don't have a free arm the way the home machines do. But basically I'm just staying on my 1/2 inch guide because that's what my hem is. Pants turned around. Coming down the home stretch. And that's it. So I'm going to cut my threads long because I'm going to tie them off. There's one. Let's go ahead and do that one. We'll cut it and then we'll pull the other one through. And I always do 3 of these. I've had before when I just did 2 turns that the knot has come out. So do 3 turns. Here's the second one. There's 1, 2, and 3. Okay. And there's our simple hem. Everything's tied down nicely, top stitch. So I'll do the other leg, press it, and then we'll see the end results.